Today, we're getting the insights from indie game developer Manthos Lappas, who's working on Asthenia, from Greece, living in Sofia, Bulgaria. Manthos, thanks for joining.
Hello, John. Thank you for having me today.
So, do you want to describe your game and tell me more about the game?
Yeah, of course. So, Asthenia is my first actually indie game that I started developing back in 2019. And it's an action adventure game with survival and horror elements. And it's currently in development for PC.
Can you tell me some more about some of the mechanics and the systems in the game?
Of course. So actually, I got some inspirations. I mean, I played a lot of similar games back in the time. Some of my favorites have been like Amnesia games, Resident Evil, especially the recent ones that have been like the reboot of the first-person games. So there's a lot of inspiration from those games. I also have been inspired a lot from games like Outlast, Dying Light. So basically, Asthenia features a mix of features from all my favorite games.
Can you tell me more about the setting and the story of the game?
Of course. So, Asthenia is based in an alternate dimension of ancient entities and other distorted foes. So, your goal there, being a trapped protagonist in this world, is to survive and escape this world in the end. So, what happens in terms of gameplay is that you, like Resident Evil, you collect a lot of keys and other sacred artifacts that allow you to progress through the rooms, through the map, and basically progress through the game. But the catch here is that whatever you're doing in the game has like consequence because the enemies in my game, while you can probably bypass some of them, you can actually, if you engage them, some of them they might be able to alter the world so that has some effect on how the world responds back to you, which means the game can be more difficult or easier for you depending how you choose to tackle these areas around you. So there are a few ways to traverse the place. There's like portals that traverse you from one place to another, and usually there's a lot of secret paths to choose, which I've also introduced a lot of branching paths that lead to different story outcomes, as well as different areas where you might not be able to find in your first playthrough. So I encourage players to, give it a second play or even a third play to figure out about all the secret endings, all the secret bosses, secret encounters. And my goal was just to create as much possible dynamic world as I could do back then, because obviously it's my first game, so I didn't really know how to do a lot of those things. And I think I started very ambitious and not realizing, the issues that they're gonna arise in the future. But I think it kind of works well right now. And at this state, the game is actually playable for start to finish, but we just have to polish it. We need to add some missing content. But basically, the loop is that you're fighting the enemies or you avoid them, except the bosses that are actually mandatory in order to progress some areas. You traverse the world trying to find the portals that take you to your goal, let's say, and make some choices throughout the game. It's whether it's either defeating certain enemies, unlocking secret items, or not, which is gonna lead to a different story outcome, or completely alter your gameplay around you. Because, like I said, some enemies are gonna dynamically change the environment around you. So let's say you're traversing the world and there's a few enemies, and if you decide to defeat all of them and you have picked up a specific weapon upgrade, it might completely change the environment around you, creating more obstacles along the way, or just make it generally harder for you. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the look.
That's cool. I think a lot of people value replayability and
Mhm.
being able to get more out of the game and experience it in different ways.
Yeah, actually, I love that. And like I said, despite being my first game, I was very thirsty about making a rich world with as many elements I could fit in, given the fact that I'm mainly one person making it, despite I have some code dev help nowadays. But when I started it, I mean, nearly 5 years ago, I didn't know how to set up all those things. So basically, I started creating the base for all those systems. I was like, okay, we're going to place this alternative map here. We're going to place this alternative enemy here. And somehow, during the time, figure out a way to stitch everything together and make it work. So it's been a huge challenge.
5 years is a long time, but not necessarily unusual for a game. Did you expect to put that much time into it?
Oh, John, it's to be honest with you, I didn't have any real plan because I've been doing this on the side. I mean, when I started, I mean, just like now, uh, I'm a freelancer nowadays. I'm a concept artist and an illustrator. So my main job is providing work for clients, working for other studios. I was working for a gaming studio in Sofia. So basically, the game was always down on the side. So that kind of makes sense, for those 5 long years making it. So basically, I was working daytime, just like now, for my clients or my studios, and then evening to nighttime or early mornings I would work for the game. So it's been a long time, and basically I'll be trying to put as much work as I can, all those years.
Has the game evolved a lot, or is it still close to your original vision from 5 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. So um, the reality is, it started completely different because um, I mean, when you develop a game, and if it takes years to make it, you grow with the game as a person yourself. Your experiences around you grow, and then they form you different. For example, a little bit backstory for the game. I was doing a lot of Unreal projects before Asthenia. So actually, I started around 2016 playing with Unreal Engine because I saw some concept artists online. He was like, "Oh, now you can use like Unreal Engine for free to make games." Like, really? I didn't know that because I mean, back in our days, those tools were not accessible and we could not do that. And I was very excited, so I just like decided to download the engine and start playing with some projects. So we started with a couple like prototype games back then that we never completed, so they're just shelved for now. So Astain is the first fully realized game, but it didn't start exactly like that. Back in 2019, unfortunately, I lost early my mother to cancer, and at the same year, we lost our first unborn child. So, as you can understand, this was actually what drove me to make this specific game because I wanted to say something about my experiences that formed me as a person during those events and try to tell a very heartfelt and genuine story throughout my journey, starting as a game dev. And I thought, what better than to try to start by saying something that personal, So basically, Asenia involved, just like me, a lot throughout the years. It started like a walking simulator, which was like completely like story based. And to be honest with you, it was way more simple back then. It was like, okay, I'm going to start the game. It's going to be like, okay, you start from point A and ends to point B, and it was very straightforward path. Then during the time, I started like implementing more features, like explained before. I started incorporating more of my personal stories in the game, so it developed way beyond what I had in mind back in 2019. And actually, I'm very happy with how it looks right now, how much more complex it is, how I was able to tell my personal story through this game. And yeah, it's definitely a completely different game from what started back then.
So it sounds like you're truly putting your soul into the game.
Hmm.
And one thing that's hard to capture from just talking is how the game looks. And I think probably because of all your concept artwork, the setting is just it's beautiful, but it's also really dark and looks really scary, which not a lot of games do very well. So it's I think I'll share some screenshots, but it just looks
Yeah, of course.
very
I have
immersive.
some things I would love to say about all that great notice of yours. So basically, it's gonna sound probably funny to some people, but I come from Greece, and as a Balkan, I always see two sides of uh, of the coin in our countries. There's a beautiful side and there's a very horrible and ugly side. So basically, what I did from my own experience, like living in Greece, living in Bulgaria, and generally drawing inspiration from other countries that I visited, but mostly from our own countries here, is that I use the essence of each country's negatives and positives, if you can put it like that. So you can notice in the game that there's a lot of like ancient style, like ancient, like even Greek, style of architecture mixed with more post modern apocalyptic setting, which was completely intentional for the story as well, which of course I wouldn't like to spoil. But how it came to be like that is that my experiences from both Greece and Bulgaria kind of merged together in this concept. And like you said, I've been using a lot of concept art to build my world because that's how I work as an artist. Because I'm primarily an artist and not an actual developer, as some would say. So basically, I took some things that I liked from both countries and things I didn't like. And the reason was that in order to have beauty in something, I believe as an artist, you have to always contrast with something that is not as beautiful, let's say. So you have to contradict those elements what in whatever you're creating. You need light to have dark, so it's how to complement the other element. So basically a lot of post-apocalyptic elements, they come from a lot of inspiration coming from my trips to Greece, some kind of like abandoned villages here in Bulgaria, and other like industrial sites that I've seen and really inspired me, to tell this decayed story in the game, which matches my own personal experiences from what happened in my life, and I wanted to combine it in this game. So it's exactly like you said. I wanted to present beauty, but I also want to present like the ugliness and decay and rot of this world. But it's important to have both elements in order for them uh, to make each other shine.
So how
Um,
about the assets in the game? Are you doing a lot of the 3D modeling then?
yeah, actually, the huge majority is assets I created from a long time ago. Actually, when uh, back in 2019, I believe I have some spare assets around from another discarded project that I used here in Asthenia. Of course, I'm using a lot of assets from store like Megascans for like mostly foliage, like daily life assets that it would be pain for me to create and would take a long time to create and not as good, to be honest. So basically, the personalized assets that I want to create are the characters, the player, the buildings, um, the monsters, basically everything you see that makes the game look more unique in its own style. So more of those like ancient kind of looking buildings, and all the assets for the enemies were created by me, the creatures. Yeah, so a huge majority is like things I created myself.
And how about the programming side? Did you have to learn a lot and you're doing a lot of that yourself too?
Yeah, that was a disaster. To be honest, I mean, I'm a slow learner. And I tried, one of the reasons I was drawn into Unreal was the fact that it uses visual scripting with blueprints, and probably as other developers have noted, it's very good for artists because it's very visual. It's more natural for us to understand it. But unfortunately for me, even that was difficult to grasp. So it took me many years I mean, even before Asthenia, I tried to do very simple things back in 2016, and it took me many years to grasp how to do. And actually, I had to constantly innovate in Asthenia. Like, I would do the most hacky ways to implement like a simple mechanic, and where it was not working, I would try to make it as a feature and just kind of justify that idea. Oh, it's like, for example, I used to have the old system of saving being like you save one and that's it. You cannot reuse one save and you have to find the next one. And I found it to be very challenging and very difficult for the player. But that limitation was coming from a point that I couldn't program it. So I had to find like I'm not sure if I can call it smart ways, so I'm gonna call it hacky ways to implement it into the game design. So it took me a long time, John, to try to implement like a lot of the mechanics I wanted. So I had to constantly learn. I tried, like others, to learn from YouTube tutorials. I tried to read a little bit, but um, it's difficult for me to read. I mean, I'm dyslexic, so I have a really difficult time reading and getting very confused. So I'm more of like a visual guy. So I prefer like seeing the visual tutorials and try to copy. And of course, the problem was that with that is that it doesn't always work because for every person that developing their game, there's a lot of different variables that they're not going to be there in the tutorial. So it resulted in a lot of problems throughout the years. And even there was a point that I kind of abandoned the game for like maybe 6 months because I got so desperate, so devastated. There was a lot of crying, there was a lot of sweat and endless nights, frustration that I was thinking that I'm never going to make it happen because of the programming side, because it was the only side that was concerned about. I mean, being an artist, I have worked in the films industry, so I have an experience about direction. I have experience in generally work in the games industry as well. But the one thing I didn't have experience was the programming. So that was the biggest nightmare for me until very recently, where around half year ago, my friend and code dev joined me to help me polish the game and basically clean up my mess. Because if you ask my code dev, he would tell you that I use a lot of hacky ways that, despite they're kind of admirable for someone who never done something like that before, they were not the most optimized ways to make this work. So we would have a lot of crashes, a lot of things were not working. But basically, whatever you've been seeing on trailers, on gameplay before that, it was all set up by me. But a lot of those things that were not working consistently. So we had to figure out a way to make them, polished and more functional. So now my code dev who joined me recently has helped me to basically rewrite a lot of the code and make sure things working as smooth as possible, of course, for two people making it, and introducing some of the features that I was not able to understand how to implement or, just generally create. But after those 5 years, I can tell you that although I learned a few things and I know how to do a few things myself, I can say that I cannot do complicated gameplay stuff or gameplay design. So my focus has been always like world building, storytelling, and generally immersing the player to my worlds, which is my strong point as and more known as an artist in the industry for the past 2 decades. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been a rough ride with the programming. I'm very grateful to have help nowadays, to even introduce things that I didn't know how to do, and that helps me even to grow myself because my code dev is great. For one, he's a software engineer with huge experience, and he's helped me understand a lot of things now in the game, how we can do more optimized, and I get to grow with it and learn myself.
Have you tried using AI at all for concepts in programming or troubleshooting or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, recently I was uh, actually uh, I don't know if inspired is the right word, but I thought about using Grok on Twitter because some other devs were using it. I was like, okay, let's try to ask some questions. So I had to ask to do some troubleshooting. So I would have some problems. For example, I want to try to implement some features, and I would try to see how AI just gives results based on those questions. And I can say it kind of helped me to look to the right direction and have like a more concentrated like I'd say a result of answers that give me a better direction where to look. And basically, I would take it and show it to my code dev and be like, "Does any of this make sense to you? And can we use anything like that? Or give us a direction or any hints or tips?" So, although I have not been using it until now, so probably it's been like I don't know, like a month. I started like playing with it, just like because I saw other developers doing it. But for some simple things I do think that it did help me to not understand how to exactly solve a problem, but how to look beyond that and try to like move to the right path, if we can say it like that. So I don't have like a real big experience with AI, to be honest with you, to give a better answer.
I've found it useful for the same kind of things sometimes, just to differentiate like what's the difference between this concept, and you
Yeah,
always want to double check it, but it can be very helpful for being your tutor in that
yeah,
sense.
exactly. So how are you using it? How have you been using it yourself?
Well, I mostly just play with it. So I've played with it to actually try writing some code and just doing little creative coding and things like that. But I can think of one example where I was trying to do some trigonometry conversion. I was like, how do I convert these XY coordinates into an angle that I can
Oh, I see.
use? And it was like, oh, well, you want to do the a sine 2 or whatever. So stuff like
Yep.
that was helpful for me.
That's cool. Yeah. Can I ask you which AI model you're using?
Uh, I use Grok mostly now because that's the one that I have the most access to.
Yeah, others said, I mean, I researched a little bit, and there were a few game developers that actually suggested it. So I was like, okay, let's try it and see how it helps. And again, I mean, even if it doesn't give you most accurate results, I mean, I think it does give you good overall direction. And I like that it's concentrated, that it can give you like a list of things to further research yourself.
Are you familiar with the term rubber duck debugging?
No.
This is something in the programming world, and the story goes something, I don't remember who came up with it, but it's like there's a senior programmer at a company, and anytime a junior comes in to ask him a question, he points to the rubber duck and he makes them ask the question to the rubber duck. And in the process of forming the question, they often answer their own question.
Okay.
And so, just trying to take the time to create and craft a good question, you can kind of learn a lot from that. So just using it
That's
in that aspect is nice too.
that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, like I told you before, I mean, I've been many times kind of embarrassed to start talking about, I mean, years ago to start talking about being a game dev because actually, I mean, I bear the label of a concept artist. I mean, of course, I worked in the game industry, I worked in the film industry, but starting as a game developer, it's kind of new to me, and I was like, how do I talk like a game dev when I don't even know basic terms and things like you mentioned just now, to other devs and being like kind of embarrassed for that. But I guess a lot of starting developers have this kind of insecurities. Yeah.
Well, these days, to me, game developer is a pretty broad umbrella. And in this case, you probably lean a little more into game designer
Yeah,
than game
exactly.
developer, but I still
Yeah.
think it all fits together, especially in the indie world where
Hmm.
one person usually wears every single hat.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I like the term game designer actually because I mean I do myself mostly as a game designer, to be honest with you, because I do handle a lot of things that heavily rely, on art direction and scenes direction, game design, lighting, and all those things. So those are most of my favorite, things to do in the game process.
And I think it's incredibly valuable. Most developers well, I don't say most, but a lot of them are just programmers. And
Mm,
so
yep.
they don't know anything about lighting, and their whole setting and atmosphere is really lacking. And
Mm,
so that's one thing that I think really stands out about your game is just
thank
the
you. Yeah.
immersion and the lighting and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes from, years of observation. Even, I mean, the same principles apply. I believe the same principles apply to all kind of media that I relate. For example, I come from a traditional artist background. I mean, I studied in Athens back in 2000, so I studied all the fine arts and the traditional media before we even had computers properly. Especially back in Greece. It was very new. So I got mostly like a traditional education, even though I was an artist since a very young age. Before I formally studied, but when we transitioned to the digital world, and actually I was told by a very good friend of mine to try to experiment, with digital media, which opened so many doors for me, and I started working, abroad with clients and studios. But it's a thing that I believe that those principles, like lighting, uh, architecture, if you know the fundamentals from traditional, teaching, you can transition those to the digital world as well. I mean, because I was also doing like physical sculpting. So naturally, it was easier for me to transition to 3D digital sculpting to create my own assets, So I would understand the forms, I would understand, generally the shapes and everything. So it's the same with lighting as well. And although I'm not actually very happy in some sections of the game, I strive to try to improve where I can. But there's always some difficulties using an engine for the first time, and understand exactly how it's working with elements like, for example, fog or other particles and how those result to the overall scene. So those are the more technical aspects I have to figure out, despite I understand how to do lighting.
One other aspect that is really important for immersion is the sound and the music. How are you approaching that?
Yeah, so I am doing the sound design and the music as well so far. So that resulted from a few reasons actually. So we didn't have funding, and living in the Balkans, I mean, it's a little bit more rough for a lot of people who know in the industry to get to fund, your own endeavors. So I had to try to come up with ways to reduce cost for this first game, and because I didn't know where really it's going, I wanted to try to reduce, expenses until I see it goes somewhere, or if we get some funding in the future. So because I had some background in the music as well, I used to like play a lot of piano traditionally. I had an understanding of synthesizer and stuff like that. So while I didn't have like formal education, I could understand how to compose, and write and do sound design. And thankfully, a lot of people responded very positive to the sound design. And I think a big reason to that is that I studied a lot of games that are well known for their sound design, so I try to copy and observe what makes those games, unique in their sound design, which for me is like, again, it's similar to drawing. It's again variety, it's rhythm, it's how to say, like not have something being monotonous, have a lot of variety in the sound, um, make it random where it needs to. So basically, whatever works in arts, I believe it translates to other parts of the creation as well. So I try to follow the same principles, but in music and sound design. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I approach it. And I started using some free tools basically to compose music. I've been using a lot of samples, music in combination of my own recordings on the top. So that's how I've been doing it mostly. It's been difficult.
What kind of tools are you using for that?
Oh, I think I'm using the most simple and probably gonna sound funny to some people, but of course I use Audacity for a lot of editing. But when it comes to composing, nowadays I'm using a place called BandLab online. If you know about that, I found it
Hmm.
to have very great sounds, loops and samples for what I need. And basically I combine that with some of my own synth recordings and drone sounds like that, and I really like the results. Yeah, I mean, probably they're way more advanced stuff, but I was not able to figure out because I don't come from like a professional music digital background. So I'm just trying to get anything that helps me get the job done.
I'm also into music. I've spent way too much money on libraries and stuff,
I want to
but
ask you about that. Yeah.
yeah, I do have a spreadsheet, so I do know exactly how much it is. But Yeah, I love talking about that stuff too. So if you ever want to chat about that stuff, or there's any way I could contribute,
I would
would
love
love to
to.
talk.
That's one of the areas I'm liking. And again, it's kind of funny to say, but I think many solo devs they have the same story. Like we don't have money, we don't have funding, we have to find a way to kind of make it work ourselves. And being the one thing I think it's nice when you do that is that when you're really passionate, because even if you have a little bit knowledge about to do all those things, like you said before, handling a project by your own, you have to do a lot of things by yourself, and it's good if you have a background on doing a little bit of everything. Like I said, I mean, I had some background in music, and that helped me a lot. So I'm like, oh my god, I'm so excited to just write my own music the way I hear it in my own head. So that's something very special in that. And of course, I don't want to diminish professionals. Of course, they can do way better job than I can do, but there's something really so unique about a creator who makes their own games to actually translate directly the sounds of their souls. I don't know how if that makes sense, but it's something that only you can hear it and feel it. You know what I mean?
Oh, I totally understand and
It's something
agree.
that when I'm playing the game, for example, I mean, there were a lot of kind people who reached out to me for music, and I'm very grateful for the interest. But again, like I said, I mean, I was not able to even hire anyone. So I had to rely on myself. And when I was playing the game, I was like, wow, I can hear this sound. I can hear how this area sounds like. And knowing the story, knowing every bit of the game, it's so personal to me to even like be focused and try to create my own sounds. Even though they're not the most professional sounds, they're still the sounds that come from my own experience and my own connection to the game.
Have you considered working with a publisher or doing a Kickstarter or a fundraiser?
Yeah, so let me please start with the Kickstarter part because that was one of the lot of people talked to me about, and actually I happened to talk with a few peers who had like Kickstarter campaigns. Some of them they didn't go well, some of them they went very well. And one thing everyone told me, I don't know if it's true or if it's worked like that on Kickstarter. They said that in order to get approved, you need a lot of followers and basically to have a fan base, to support you. And the sad reality is that we don't have the backing support right now. To be honest with you, I mean, we even tried to do a small like remember a place that's called like Buy Me Coffee, I think. You know that one? So we
Hmm.
try there. So despite the fact that I have like thousands of followers like merged in social media, all my galleries, unfortunately the support was very little. So, it didn't make sense for us to try to set up something like a Kickstarter. And we've been so busy with everything with the game, with our jobs. And pretty much what held me back is that everyone in private kept telling me that you might not be able to go far if you don't have like a lot of actual fan base, to back in. And again, I'm not sure if that's the case, but even when we tested it for smaller things, even for Patreon back then, it didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. So that's when what it comes to Kickstarter. Now about publishers, that's a good question because um, despite the fact I didn't look for publishers myself. We had a lot of interest for quite a few publishers so far from different countries. Uh, Obviously, I cannot specifically mention due to NDAs and other, but we had from all continents so far, and it's been a very interesting experience because we had a lot of I don't I don't know if I can say like rejection, but we were looking for different things creatively. Let's say they wanted to change a lot of things in the game. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure the end result would represent what I had in mind that I wanted to say and do with Asthenia. And again, it's an extremely personal project. I know many developers feel the same, but just like for them, for me, it's the same. And I didn't want to compromise, to change anything for just go with trends or go with mainstream kind of games. So I want to keep it the way I created, let's put it like that. So that kept me back from proceeding with some of deals. Then there was the usual like a lot of publishers, they want to see like a lot of wish lists in order to proceed, for a deal, which we don't have a lot of wish lists yet. We don't have a demo that actually I've mentioned on social that we're actively working on a demo, me and my co-dev. Uh, Generally, we got a lot of interesting input from publishers, how we can deal the game. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do, to be honest with you, because I don't know if we have found yet what's more profitable for us or makes sense for us. And again, I'm a little bit skeptic yet how we can work with publishers to be on the same page, to do things and bring this game out to the market. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see, because pretty much everyone is waiting for a demo. They want to see how it's going and basically maybe try to talk with some of them again after that. But I'm not like negative on like working with publishers or anything. It's just whoever publisher might be, I would like to work with someone who respects my vision, knows that I come from this certain background, that I'm not looking to create like a mainstream game. I believe Asthenia is quite a niche game, if you can describe it like that. And I want to keep it the way it is, and because first of all, I don't want to betray the vision I have for myself and the reason I'm making this kind of game.
Yeah, setting those boundaries and knowing what your boundaries and your lines are, I think, is really
Mm-hmm.
important. And it sounds like even in just having the discussions, even if you don't work with them, you could probably learn a lot and are learning a lot.
Yes,
Marketing.
yes,
Marketing seems to be the biggest challenge for most people. So if you talk to all these publishers and you say, well, how do you market? What would you do to market my
mm-hmm.
game? You can learn what are the best strategies that they've
Exactly.
discovered.
Exactly, and it's very interesting times we live in, because a lot of other developers may tell you that we live in an age that you can do a lot of marketing yourself nowadays. And there are also people who are not. I mean, there are people who are happy with their publishers and others that are not. Sometimes there are going to be publishers that don't do well with marketing. They might abandon your game if it doesn't do well with marketing. So that's a lot of concerns for us to take in consideration. Because you never know. Uh, what kind of collaboration you're gonna have, right? And we doing it for the first time. Uh, it's natural for us to be very skeptical about how we're gonna approach uh, this thing with Asthenia. And again, like you said, John, I mean, at least it's great experience to discuss with those people and learn a few tips. See how they're doing marketing, and I guess see how it goes from there. I mean, we'll see.
So, do you have a release date in mind?
While I have not talked about that officially, I do have a plan in mind. Obviously, a lot depends on how I work with my co-dev. Our life schedules. We're both very busy with with our day jobs. I mean, but generally, when it comes to me, I mean, I would like to have the game out sometime next year, 2026. Yep.
Well, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to share or plug?
I don't know if it's like an advice to other co-devs or people trying to do something, but I would love to encourage people to try and do what they love. I mean, especially when you're not bound by financial means. I would always encourage people, even younger people, or people our ages, of course, to always go with their heart when they're creating a product. Try not to be uh, always affected by the trends, because I believe as a creator and as an artist that if you do something that comes out of your heart, it's gonna tell and it's gonna show. What I'm trying to say is that if you're trying to make a product just to appeal and it's completely out of your reach or your understanding how to build it and create it, I think it's not gonna come out as how to say, as true, or
Authentic.
yeah, exactly, authentic. Yeah, that's why I'm trying always to be unaffected by trends. I know that Asthenia is very unique, probably project that it might not appeal to the mainstream audience, but I do know that there are people out there who are going to probably resonate a lot with this game and understand what I have to say in this game and embrace, the heart and soul and passion put in this game. That's why I want to say to other people to do something that they really love, because I truly believe that when you do that, eventually it will come out, it will show to people, and they're gonna have to be people out there who are gonna really, really embrace it and probably love it. And when it comes to Asthenia, I would love to let people know that, like I said before, we're working on a demo. Hopefully, we're gonna release it this year. That's the goal, at least. And people can find me on social media, Instagram, Twitter. They can find me on YouTube, ArtStation for my art galleries, DeviantArt, TikTok. Yeah, pretty much everything under Manthos Lappas. Yep. Yeah, I guess that's all.
Well, Manthos, it was great talking to you, learning about you, learning from you, learning about the game and your process. It's all been inspiring. So thank you for your time, and I wish you
Thank
great
you.
success with the game.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was so nice to meet you. And I guess I'll talk to you later.